Let's bring in our panel. First, the host of The Agenda. On the left, Ari Rabin-Havt, who is a former advisor to Senator Harry Reid, Skyping in from Washington, D.C., and from our Newsmax newsroom, Javier Manjarres, managing editor of the Shark Tank blog. Gents, it's good to have you here. Ari, to the optics of the president's vacation. Look, everybody goes on vacation. We understand that. But making a beeline for the golf course 8 minutes after delivering a speech about James Foley's execution and the president saying we had the resolve to stop that, you got to agree it's not a real good move in terms of perception.
The optics of presidential vacations are frankly always bad. I mean, and it's one of those things that's, to be frank, really wrong with Washington, D.C. and something, look, Democrats were a little bit harsh on Bush about his vacations to the ranch during the Bush administration. Republicans are harsh to Obama. I'm sure whoever the next president is, the opposite party will be harsh with them when they take vacations. And it's kind of, I think, part of the silliness of Washington, D.C.
Well, Javier, is it just this polarized partisan perception, or is there something else going on here?
I agree with Ari. It's happened with George W. Bush. But look, I got to give President Obama credit for being consistent for 8 years of being on a vacation. I think he's been on an 8-year vacation. Again, this goes back to the failed foreign policy, as you mentioned before. All President Obama has done over the past 8 years is threatened or endangered the lives of countless American citizens and assets around the world. You know, I think he should maybe call President Bush, dust off that BlackBerry of his, and ask him how to be a real respectable commander-in-chief, a commander-in-chief that projects strength as opposed to weakness.
Ari, whatever you want to say about George W. Bush, and I know you have some bon mots to serve up here in just a second in terms of foreign policy and perhaps the former president's ratings, but our current commander-in-chief has seen his numbers curtail greatly, especially in the realm of foreign policy. So, what can the president do to improve his standing and move from observer-in-chief to commander-in-chief?
Look, I think he is commander-in-chief. He brought us out of Iraq, out of Afghanistan. I think he needs to do a better job explaining to the American people why ISIS matters, why we have to get re-involved, and why and what we should be doing there and why we should be there. And I think he needs to make that case to the American people. I think that's what's wrong, not his actions as commander-in-chief.
Well, Javier, there's Ari saying he brought us out of Iraq, out of Afghanistan. Correct me if I'm wrong, we're still in Afghanistan, and it looks like we may have special forces headed back to Iraq.
Right, we have ISIS because of Obama's failed policies, failed Iraqi and foreign policies. Why are we combating these or thinking about combating these Muslim extremists now? You know, back to George W. Bush. The world was a much safer place under George W. Bush. Where is it now under President Obama? This is all Obama's doing. He's responsible for ISIS creation, because if we didn't have forces on the ground in the Middle East, in Iraq, ISIS would not be emboldened to be where they are now, to act how they've been acting. They're emboldened because they're not afraid of President Obama, just like many of our enemies around the world are, including Russian President Putin.
Ari.
So are you saying you want troops on the ground in Iraq?
I mean, absolutely. Protect American interests.
Take that, try to sell that to the American people, see how that goes.
Well, you know what? We wouldn't have to think, we wouldn't be thinking about boots on the ground if it wasn't for Obama's failed policies. ISIS is where it is now because of President Obama's actions.
Ari, as I hear things, I might take exception or offer my own friendly amendment to what Javier is proffering. Heard a lot of people talk about not, quote, permanent boots on the ground and a massive infrastructure, but returning to the reality of making airstrikes more effective by a small group of special forces on the ground, calling in airstrikes, being there to see what is going on based on intelligence. That's far different from committing hundreds of thousands of troops with a major footprint again. Would you not agree?
Yeah, no, there is a difference. And look, I kind of am under the assumption that our special forces troops are operating in Iraq, in Syria, and in other places. As we found out last week, our special forces troops tried to conduct a rescue mission in Syria over to save those journalists. So I'm kind of under the assumption that we have special forces there working with the Peshmerga and other places in Iraq and Syria.
All right, so it's already from your purview, you figure the guys are on the ground already.
But,
okay.
But JD, that goes back to the President Obama's irresponsibility to divulge top secret special ops missions to the press just because he feels, I mean, that goes back to what I said, endangering American lives and assets around the world. It's ridiculous.
Ari, Javier brings up a point that is worth pursuing. The notion that last week, in the wake of the beheading of James Foley, in the wake of the brief announcement from the president, suddenly there is a formal announcement from the Pentagon about a failed rescue mission. Now, to do that, it's a curious form of transparency coming with a very sensitive action that was taken. Do you think that was the right thing to do?
Releasing the fact that this mission happened?
Yeah.
Well, I always prefer transparency over non-transparency, and I think in our foreign policy set, regardless of who has been president, there is a certain lack of transparency. So I always prefer when these things are revealed. I think it's good that it was revealed through, as you pointed out, through official channels as opposed to a series of leaks, which has been all too common in this administration and in other administrations past. So I'm kind of 6 1/2 dozen on that. Like I think it's more transparency is always good, and I'm kind of happy it was done through official channels. But I don't think it really affects the conversation at all.
Well, here's the problem, though. The transparency offered such background, such briefing that essentially, if not sources, the methods were released, and the implications, the consequences for the sources on the ground, the intelligence we depended on to make the case in the first place. That transparency could result in the deaths of those who provided the intelligence. So that's the real consequence there, Ari. Can you see where that kind of transparency might not be a good thing?
I don't know. I feel like those sources and methods, I know we always talk about sources and methods as needing to be protected, but I don't feel like that saying there was a mission with special forces in Syria that failed puts those sources and methods at risk. I don't see how it does that.
Javier, your take on that public report?
Sometimes you just need to shut up, because you know what? I see the whole transparency angle Ari's talking about, and I agree with it to some extent. But when it comes to these top secret missions to divulge information just to kind of look tough in the eyes of the world, it does more bad than good. It just no sense. Why divulge something that failed? Whether it failed or not, you don't talk about it, because now it emboldens people like groups like ISIS to do other things. To say, hey, listen, hey, they tried to come at us, and you know what? They failed, or they didn't fail, and now we're just going to retaliate against that. There's no reason why we need to divulge this kind of information,
but
sensitive
ISIS
information.
Clearly knew they came at them, since we shot and killed their guys during the mission.
Right, but again, the world didn't need to know this. Emboldens not so much ISIS here, but all these other their assets around the country, around the world, their cohorts around the world, other terrorists.
Well, let me get to another topic before we have to part company in a minute and a half, and that is the fact that the president goes back on the road Friday to New York and Rhode Island for fundraisers. In the midst of that Martha's Vineyard vacation, there was a big fundraiser featuring both the president and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Is our commander-in-chief just essentially the fundraiser-in-chief for the Democratic Party, Ari, and that's basically the extent of his activities?
Well, the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, is also de facto the leader of their political party, and therefore becomes fundraiser-in-chief for that party. I mean, that's part of the job of, frankly, of being leader of your political party, which as president, frankly, you are. I would like to be in a situation where the president doesn't have to go out and fundraise for his political party, but frankly, that's the politics of today.
Final 30 seconds goes to you, Javier.
Listen, I agree with Ari, but then again, why are Democrats moving away from him? Because his failed policies have jeopardized their re-election or election campaigns now. Moving into 2014, 2016, he's become more of a pariah than anything.
Gentlemen, we will have to leave it there. Ari and Javier, we appreciate it very much. In fact, I think, Javier, you may be rejoining us a bit later. So thanks to you both for joining the discussion this morning. And we don't want you to go anywhere. We want you to stay right here, and we'd like your comments on what you see about the president's foreign policy. Why don't you tweet me your remarks at Newsmax TV, #AmericasForum, and we'll be right back.